You were the keyboard player for the chart-topping band Kajagoogoo. And what was it like for you to be in that band at that time? Oftentimes when we have to deal with stress and uncertainty, our souls yearn for both nostalgia and hope. Tonight, we're going to talk about both as we rewind back to the 1980s and talk to Stuart Neal, the keyboard player for the band Kajagoogoo. If you don't remember who they are, you will after you hear this. Stuart, thank you so much for joining Raven's Heart for this interview.
You're very welcome. It's a delight to be here and to be able to, isn't technology wonderful?
It is. Who would have ever thought, 20, 30 years ago that we could connect, and you are in the UK and I'm over here in South Carolina, that we can do this. Technology really is a gift that God's given us to be able to do this and to glorify Him.
Yes, and it's been one of those seasons of change as well, because the past few years we've had to rely, haven't we, more on this kind of platform for many things. Worship is one as well. So, but I'm sure we can get onto a few of those points during the interview.
Oh, absolutely. Let's hop in the time machine and go back to the early 80s, where I was pretty cool, I think, maybe in my own mind. But you were the keyboard player for the chart-topping band Kajagoogoo. And what was it like for you to be in that band at that time, personally?
When I think back, because you're absolutely right, it was early 80s. And if you recall, coming out of the late 70s, there was a radical change in the music industry. What was known as the dinosaur rock bands of the time, people like Genesis and Yes and Tangerine Dream even, their time was kind of their heyday, let's say. Now they're great bands still, for sure. And one of the members of the Kajagoogoo, Nick, he's very much into that kind of prog rock, and he plays with different people of that ilk. But what happened was that there was a radical change, and this was the punk movement. It kicked out a lot of the rock kind of gigs. The rock gigs had to move over to it. And then out of that came what was called the new wave. And we were sort of dovetailed into that new wave era. And to answer your question, it was very exciting. It happened very quickly, really. It seemed to happen quickly, but we were traveling the journey for some years before it kicked off. So, it was a great time and everything to play for. It was a burning ambition for us to make some headway in the music industry. But hey, what's new? How many thousands have that ambition but don't get the opportunity? We were, I personally believe in God, so I believe that there was God's hand in it all, even though it was a very out and out commercial success and really smack bang in the teen genre. But if people could sort of see past that, they would know that we were a band that played our instruments. We performed ourselves, and it was difficult to get over that hurdle. And this is why you'll see a change in the second album, third album. But it was a very exciting time, Glenn. Very exciting.
Yeah, it was definitely a time of revolution in music. The synthesizer was really taking off, and you had the ability to play the keyboards. First of all, when did you start playing keyboards? How did you get into that? And how were you able to get on the cusp of the wave of the synthesizer revolution, which is really, you were shaping music of today?
So without going into because I give testimonies about my journey, and that may take 10 minutes, it may take half an hour. I'm going to condense this down for you. Essentially, it was a classical upbringing. I went to a college of music in London, so I had that founding in a technical musical knowledge. I came out of that, and it was. I always remember the first iteration of Kajagoogoo. We got into a room together, and I had this synthesizer called. There were two synths. One was a Crewmaster string machine, and it had some limited presets, which were about 8 different presets. An out and out 80s string sound really doesn't sound like strings at all. It's some thin, raspy type of effort. But I tell you what, live, it worked. So I had that on the one hand doing the pads, and I had a lead synth, the ARP Axe, monophonic. And that was the one that I used to, it had the LFO pads and bends, and I really gave it some serious, expression, let's say. That was the starting place. And then along came the Jupiter 8, the Roland Jupiter 8. And it was that then was the catalyst for a lot of the music on the first album, of which Too Shy was the leading song, and still is, remains to this day, really. But there's a lot of sequential arpeggiation, and the Roland Jupiter 8 provided that. It was just synced into a TR-808 drum machine, and it was amazing to me, just a bass synth that you could arpeggiate across different octaves randomly, etc. And those, you'll hear it now. A lot of the tracks had that as a basis, sequential pop, and that launched us, if you like, coupled with the other aspects to the band. The bass sound was quite distinctive. Everyone had their own distinctive sound, to be honest. Nick tends to get a lot of, if you like, people would gravitate to that as part of as the sort of the main focus of the band. But actually, if you study it, there's some very innovative musicianship across the board, and yeah, it was a good combination, good chemistry. But it was the Roland Jupiter 8 that was the catalyst to set it all going.
And which was your favorite keyboard?
At that time, very much so. It was the JP8. My live setup consisted of a CP80 Roland. It was a piano, but it had that'll be my little dog barking. Apologies for that. But I had a Roland CP80. I then went into the PPG portfolio, Wave Term. Now these were the early days of sampling, and they were, took a bit of getting your head round. They had 7.5-inch floppy disks for the samples, 2 disk drives. It's a collector's piece now, but very popular in some circles. But yeah, the JP8 was really the flagship for me at the time. DX7, Yamaha DX7 a little bit. Wasn't really fond of that type of synthesis on that. Although I couldn't seem to get past the presets, great electric piano, very good. And the bass, the funk bass, the slap bass I used to have. So, yeah, it was that was, if you like, the kind of foundational live set, and then studio work would come out of that.
And with music in general, music tends to define the seasons in people's lives. That's true for both musicians and non-musicians. Can you share with us how, in your personal journey, how music has helped define the different seasons of your life?
That's quite a far-reaching question. I'll try. I think one example of that I can relate a what happened when I came out of the Kaja days, and I launched into another season of looking for that elusive success again as a solo artist. Didn't work. It didn't work. I did a series of demos. I did put a band together, paid the band, and got in debt. Bit of a sob story, unfortunately, but it was a formulating character in me and a reliance and an understanding, really, what that then led me to know the Lord. But through that time, that musical journey, I met with a singer who she was a 60s artist star, actually, Helen Shapiro. And she had a gospel band and she had a jazz band. A very well-respected writer and singer. She had a couple of, you may have heard of Walking Back to Happiness in the early 60s. We weren't around in the early 60s, but that's when the track came out. So I ended up playing guitar for her in her gospel band. And, that would be another defining moment because I learned the guitar at college. I played classical guitar to a lower grade, but then that's what then branched me into the rock world, pop world, because it was the guitar. I then picked up the electric guitar, and so I've been playing the guitar for many years. And that, as I say, that's a defining moment, but also this Hebraic worship that Helen Shapiro, as a Messianic Jew, that she continues to worship and do that today. So again, just some examples of how the musical content at the time was a milestone, and it today I'm now on a Saturday I would do a streaming worship streaming on a Saturday Sabbath. So yeah, it has had a big influence.
How has your view of music changed, the purpose of music changed since the time that you were in Kajagoogoo to today?
I think the question I would phrase slightly differently in my mind's eye, in as far as, I don't think the purpose of music has ever changed. Yeah, I believe that it's more about how we as individuals tap into that the sea of the musical world across genres, across Christian and secular outlets. So the music itself, I think, is very much a created entity. God created. And I think that when we allow ourselves to, as I say, tap into certain frequencies, if you like, and I've been looking into this. I'm a piano tuner as well. I've been tuning pianos for over 4 decades now, and I'm currently doing quite a bit of it at the moment. And when you're doing that, you're actually very at one with frequency, if that makes sense. Without, it has been hijacked. I mean, it has to be said that the New Age world and different spiritual bodies have used frequencies for, if you like, healing purposes. That is a little bit, in my opinion, a bit off the beaten track. It's actually not. It's not wholesome. Some of it. So but for me, when I'm tuning a piano, the frequencies when it becomes in tune, and it's a very fine line for a note to oscillate fractionally out. And when it's aligned, there's a resonance that it's a multiplication kind of thing. So that's really an area I would say that I've allowed myself to. I think it's not, the purpose hasn't changed, but I'm now coming into a different, and we've all, I think, had a journey. You're looking for new things. If you're trying to write a new song, you're trying to look for different new ideas of maybe how you're using a synth sound, or how you're creating a recording, whatever it is. So I think that creativity leads us into new areas. The purpose is the same. I believe it's to worship our Lord. That's the key difference. I certainly wasn't using the music in Kajagoogoo necessarily to worship God at that time intentionally. I hope it was a blessing to him in some way. It was a blessing to a lot of people, and still is, and it's still played, and people very much, get enjoyment out of it. So in that sense, I think it was a good thing.
As you were talking about the frequencies, I was just thinking about when Israel marched around the walls of Jericho, and that was frequency when when the walls came down and they were in alignment with the Lord. And I was just thinking about that, and you're really onto something with that there.
That's an excellent example. It really is. Yeah, that's a very good example. The shofar,
yes,
and it's the penetrating nature of that sound. Yeah, absolutely. It had a big impact.
And that is a very penetrating sound too. It sends chills down my spine a lot of times when I hear it. It's a very penetrating, haunting, and beautiful sound. Can you share with us your testimony of how you came to faith in Jesus?
Of course, yeah. I think the starting place would be to say in a family, my upbringing, my parents, particularly my mother, was at a later age of she was about mid-late 50 odd. She had an encounter. We went to church from an early age, but it was kind of a nominal Christianity. It was more Sunday worship, Easter, Christmas, very traditional, the services. And then later my mother was baptized. And I think really down her prayers had a big impact over the years. So I've mentioned to you about the days when I was at college. So coming out of those days, and this was when, really it was I began to. It was a kind of rebellion, and I'm not proud to say that, but it was a period of time when, and I was 17, 18, and this was just before the formative years of Kajagoogoo. And so I diverted from the church at that point. Wasn't interested in Christianity, wasn't interested in God, and it wasn't on my agenda. The band happened. Now the thing is, I mentioned to you that our ambition was very much to make headway. Now, in any sphere of life, when we have something that we dearly, dearly seek after, an ambition that drives us, and it could be you're a lawyer, a sports person, whatever it is, musician, and then when that ambition gets realized and fulfilled, that's really the test of actually what did it mean all along. Because for me, when it happened, we sold 3.5 million singles globally. These were when people used to buy little round things that were made of plastic, and you put them onto gramophones, the radiograms and stuff. you know of what I speak. But it's coming
Yes.
back. The analog is not lost. But we sold a heck of a lot of those bits of plastic of that song, and it was wild. You know, your dream. This was a dream come true. So you think, hey, Stuart, surely you're happy about that. You know, surely you're on top of the moon about that. Well, once you get over the adulation and all of the trappings of the success, you know, this is when I realized that actually my life was pretty empty, and I became very depressed. And that's the point at which actually, it was a couple, you know, we lived in North London. So there's a couple upstairs that we got to know. And, you know, they didn't, they actually spoke to us as normal people. I invited them at the time. They came down to the Top of the Pops studio, and they were just level headed, and you know, it was a deep impact at the time. One thing led to another. They were Christians and ended up one evening being invited to pray and ask the Lord Jesus to come in, change my life, and fill me, and that's what happened.
Wow. Wow. That's just wonderful. You know, and as I was preparing for this edition, and from what I'm hearing you share, yeah, I keep thinking of Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for those who love the Lord. And I just really see that so clearly in your life. And I don't know if you've thought about it, or if the Lord's quickened it to you, just with what you did with keyboards in the 80s was, you know, we talked about it earlier, redefining music, and it was even redefining worship music, and something that we see in churches a lot now, a lot more of. And there's a picture of it down there. It's the Nord. The Nord, yes. And that's my friend Poe. He's the third wheel on this show, the my Raven, the signature Nord Red. And that is now a very integral part of worship, and God used you to help shape that. And I'm sure that there are other keyboard players now, or that have been in the past, that were influenced by what you did, who are now praising and worshiping the Lord. When I was, you know, in 1983, I was taking piano lessons, and I was fascinated with synthesizers, and I loved the music of Kajagoogoo because of the synthesizers, and it just captivated me, and it really shaped and influenced my interest in music, and is why we're here. So thank you for all that you have done and how God's used you.
So thank you for saying. I get similar contacts. You know, it's not the same intensity by any means. In actual fact, it surprises me that people would write, and they do write. And obviously social media, there's a lot of contact comes that way, saying the similar sort of things about it. And, you know, I would try and respond to try. You know, I'm notoriously bad at doing this, but I do get it. I get there in the end if people can be patient. You know, whether it's what keyboards did you play, and, you know, how did you achieve certain sounds, whatever it might be. Once I start opening the doors into my memory of that, you know, you get engrossed again. I enjoy it very much. I like being creative. I'm using a completely different set of tools now to create. But I'm still, as I gravitate to the same type of sounds, you know, tweaking oscillators, and you know, if I had more time would be great, because I do enjoy it very much. My music writing, you know, I'd use sample libraries now in a different way. I'm very interested in piano more than I ever have been. I'm looking forward to the day when I'd be able to have again a large instrument to worship on and record, and but the synths and the sounds, it's changed out of all recognition. Really, everything is at our fingertips, isn't it?
It
It's
is.
but in some ways, it's not as easy to have that distinctiveness. You see, because it's all been done. I've you know, so it needs to come from you, from within, and these are tools. So it's what you're trying to say. You know, and you can write a song, can't you? Very easily put a backing track together. It's but to make a classic song that lasts for decades, and you know what? That's surprising in itself, because we didn't even think Too Shy should be the first single to be released at the time.
Really?
Yes, it was the record company that convinced us that was the one. You know, because it was quite different to a lot on the. As I say, there was a lot of sequential pop. You know, marimba sounds going on and lots of flicky stuff. And that kind of, I used to use that brass sound, thick Prophet. I mean, I didn't have a Prophet 5, but I have used them, that type of thick, slightly detuned oscillators. I love all that stuff. But Too Shy starts with that as a you know, the chords coming in is
Mm-hmm.
just, I used to like detuning, and then you put a fifth on top, so you detune it, you know, fifth upwards, and you play a minor 7 chord, and it becomes a 13th or whatever, and it's easy. Obviously, it's limited to how many progressions then you can go into, but that's what Too Shy was at the beginning. So it's E minor 7 with the fifth up, and then into F sharp minor 7. So yeah, it's just getting back to the synthesizers, really. So yeah, they're tools, and it's great to hear from people when they, you know, get in touch and say this was an influence and this had an impact. It's very pleasing to hear that.
Yeah, you've had a call on your life, and it's really awesome to be able to call you a brother in the Lord too. And it's just
Mhm.
really neat to be able to talk to you. And I want to ask about another song from Kajagoogoo that's a little bit lesser known, and that's "The Power to Forgive." Wasn't as popular as "Too Shy" was,
Yeah.
but when I listen to that song, there's some very strong biblical allusions or references in that song about forgiveness. Can you share with us how this song was inspired, and were those biblical allusions or touch points, were those intentionally interwoven into the song?
Very much so, yeah. If you loving is to live, I'm trying to remember what it was with it, the power to forgive. So Nick and Limahl were the lyricists on album 1, and then Nick took over the reins on the second and third albums as the lyricist. Now, so from a perspective of the songs on the second album, which Power to Forgive came from, you know, and there were others. Lion's Mouth all had, these ones had biblical references. Nick had recently found the Lord at that time, so that was coming through in his writing.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was absolutely intentional.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely intentional.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Lion's Mouth too, because when you watch the video, it's very poignant. It's a very poignant video for Lion's Mouth.
Yes, that song and the follow up to that, "Turn You Back on Me," were directed by a guy called Storm Ferguson, and he's not with us now. He had some very creative, innovative ideas, but certainly the thrust of that track, Lion's Mouth, came from, I think, the Book of Daniel at the time. But again, you see, it was something that lyrically I didn't create, so I couldn't really tell you exactly point on point what Nick was trying to say or saying. But certainly with the power to forgive, absolutely, forgiveness is the key for you. It's you who that died for me.
Yes.
I mean, it's. I had someone contact me and said they use this in their worship.
Wow.
There's that song. So, and that was just great.
That is great. And for those that are in the audience that have not heard these songs or seen these videos, we're including the links down in the description for you to go check them out. Definitely check out The Power to Forgive. Awesome song, and it preaches. I mean, that song absolutely preaches. Stuart, before we close out, is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Just like to say, thank you for the invitation. It's in the whole scheme of a, if you like, a career in music. The fact that you can still talk about it, still be asked, that there's an interest in what you did even many years ago. It is something that is, I find, very gratifying, and I want to say thank you for that, Glenn. I think we're moving into a particularly the time and season that we're working in and living in now is fraught with a lot of, if you like, uncertainties from a worldly perspective. So I would just say, to the people that, whatever you're doing, wherever you are headed, whatever ambition you have, one thing that I found was that without God, it really is chasing the wind. There's a book in the Bible, the Song of Songs or Song of Solomon, and Solomon speaks of everything is meaningless. It's like chasing the wind, apart from obeying the law of the Lord, which is right at the end of the book. So what I'd say is, for me, the world of 80s pop there was some joyous moments, without a doubt, and it actually now is providing some doors to speak to people, engage with people in a different way. But the main thing you want to look for when we're on this planet, it's the Lord Jesus Christ, it's Messiah, Yeshua, and He's the one. And everything else will work out. Romans 8, you said it. Everything works together for good for those that love Him and obey Him. So that would be my parting admonition for people. But the music is certainly strongly beating in my heart still. Absolutely. And who knows? There are things that are about to happen. I'm sure I'm going to get back to that creative recording process as well. I've done one solo album, a worship album with 12 tracks on it. Actually, I could make that available to people if you want, Glenn.
Yes, that would be great. We will put that link down in the description as well.
Yeah. So I'll do that. And thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you. And to our audience, until next time, peace out and rock on.
lithoscry.com